11 browse. Treading water that they drowning. I head on a swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 59 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. And we're a quarter of the way into the season now, right? We're 4 weeks in. It's a quarter of the way in the fantasy world. And, you know, we want to talk to you guys about, of course you guys knew Cordarrelle Patterson was going to be the RB1, right? And Debo was going to be a top 5 wideout, and Darnold was going to be a QB1. We all knew that, right? We've been talking about that all offseason. Now, we want to talk to you guys, and we're getting tons of questions about, is this guy for real? Is this guy for real? What should I be doing with my teams when I'm 1-3, 0-4? And my co-host tonight, Mung, and I are going to break that down. Mung, first off, it's been a couple of weeks, but I want to congratulate you on the personal news, locking up your 101 there. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, I just got engaged in New York.
That gets a count.
Thank you. But yeah, a lot going on, but still focused on football, you know.
Hey, we still have to. Rocking the Smash Accept hat for you guys that are watching on YouTube or on, now Periscope's gone, but now on Twitter Live. You guys can go check those out at Veridian Global. Let's jump right into this because we have so much, right? 4 weeks in, that puts us at the 1 quarter mark. You know, so we always talk about breaking it into quadrants and trying to talk about things and assessing our team. So I was looking at something and I found some research that Alex Cates did. Recently posted across 100,000 ESPN leagues in 2019 and 2020. If you have 10 wins across your season, you know, you go 10-4, you have a 99% chance of making the playoffs. That's pretty much a given, right? You move down to 9 wins, we're talking about a 91% chance, and then you move down to 8 wins and we get to 60%. 7 wins, 20%, 6 wins, 2%, right? That never happens. So if you might be 4-0, you might be 0-4. You know, I have a lot of teams saying, it's 0-4, it's time to hit the reset button. Not necessarily, right? I mean, you could literally win 7 more games out of your last 11 here and put yourself, or 10, depending on what your league is, and really put yourself in a position. You know, I know there's some teams out there, Mung, where you assess your team and you're like, you know what? Like in Smash Accept, you're a really good team and you're 2-2. It's not anything to get worried about. But that team, you know, I'm 4-0, but points-wise, I could very easily be 1-3, 0-4. So you got to kind of take the time after these first 4 games to really look at your team, right? I feel like a lot of people want to blow it up early, but I've seen teams go 0-4 and come back and get strong towards the end and have guys like Jonathan Taylor like last year and have those guys that really blow up and carry your team. And you might have just sold out way too early. So how do you assess things after 4 games? And we talk about that a lot, trying to see where you're at, see what kind of direction you have. But how do you assess things after 4 games?
Well, like you said, it's not so much the record, it's all the ancillary stats of how you got to your current record, right? Whether you're 0-4, 4-0, or anywhere in between, you want to look at your points fielded versus the league average. And then also the points fielded against you so far in these games, because there's a lot of reasons why a good team could be 1-3 or something like that. And with a little luck, a non-real contender is possibly 4-0 right now. And I say non-real because they're clearly in position to make the playoffs, but unless that dynasty GM is smart enough to realize, I got lucky getting here, I still need to make some moves to actually win the next 4 games. So, you know, it's important to constantly evaluate your roster and also why your record is what it is. Once you get there, I know this is all very generalized, but this is why we need context when you guys post your trade questions on Twitter, right? Because if you're 1-3, but you've got Christian McCaffrey possibly coming back and you've got some guys who are hurt or just unlucky the first few weeks, then you shouldn't panic and you should continue making moves to bolster your roster as a contender. So a lot of these trade questions are dependent on your roster and your league. And, it's hard to hit up everything with general advice that we tweet out. So
Yeah.
I mean, when you guys hit us up, as much information as possible.
Yeah, and this is the time of year where we have a lot of the, quote unquote casual fans coming onto Twitter because it's the regular season coming in there, and you guys are tagging us on Smash Accept, and it's just, who do you want, Swift or Diggs? And it's like, no, we need more context. We need to know what's going on. We need to know, what direction your team's going. We need to know what size league. We need to know, is it full PPR? Is it points per carry? Just a friendly reminder about that, because you guys are tagging Mung and myself and John and Smash Accept in so many trades, and we love answering them. We just want to give you the best advice possible, right? So, I mean, like that kind of question where do you want Swift or Diggs? There's so many other things to go involved there, So if you're 0-4, just be patient, and take a look at those things. And I had one fan, and then we're gonna talk about his trade later. He's 0-4 right now, and he's like, "Yo, Dad, can you check out this roster? What do you think here after this trade?" Because he sent a question, pretty basic question. I answered it, and then I said, "Well, let me see the rest of your team." And then he sent it to me, and I'm like, "Dude, just chill, And let's jump into that one. Actually, I know it's down a little bit further, but you segued it perfect. We're looking at. Right here, the guy sent in the trade. He's the Sultan of SWAT at Burnerman00, and this is a CEH type trade. But he goes, do I want the 23 first and second in a one quarterback league, both late picks, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire? So Twitter right now, they hate Clyde Edwards-Helaire, so they went 58% are saying take the picks, right? Get out of it. I look at it a little bit closer, and we're like, okay, if it's a one quarterback league and they're both late. So we already know this year in one quarterback leagues, and this year's class was better than the upcoming class we've seen so far. You're looking at a quarterback there, right? I mean, there's a lot of, you're looking at Trey Sermon, maybe Elijah Moore, maybe Rondale Moore, and you're giving up a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire who, weeks 1 through 3 weren't pretty, but he busted out for 19 fantasy points in week 4. He looked that part again. And then I was like, well, what you're 0-4, what does the rest of the team look like, right? Because it's one thing to just sell a running back to get a pick and make it fluid. Then he sends me his roster. He's got Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Williams, Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle, Rondale Moore, and I'm like, whoa, pump the brakes here, man. Keep Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because your team looks borderline playoff, right now. But if you just let this team go for, you be patient, I think next year this is a playoff type team. So those are the kind of situations where you really got to look at it, right? I mean, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire worth a first and a second? In my opinion, in one quarterback, that is still a Smash Accept. Twitter is totally on the other side there. And I know you've been watching Clyde Edwards-Helaire even closer than most. I mean, he looked fantastic in week 4 against my Eagles.
Yeah, and again, it's not so much the fantasy points, but the underlying usage and how these players are being deployed that really is how we should try and project out for them going forward, right? And so it's kind of a love-hate relationship with CEH right now, because the upside is there, right? The tantalizing upside of being that number 1 running back in the Chiefs offense. We know how valuable that role could be hypothetically. The problem is thus far, Patrick Mahomes has not been targeting the running backs that much. We know that they do target that position below the league average. And then at the same time, we are seeing here and there, we saw Darrell Williams get a touchdown with a goal line run this past week. So they are taking him out near the goal line in certain situations. But I do believe that one was later in the game when they were up multiple scores. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, you are correct. And what I told him is you got to look at it this way. You've had some bad luck here, right? I mean, Dobbins went down. Jonathan Taylor, aside from this week, hasn't really put up the numbers. CeeDee Lamb the last 2 weeks hasn't been himself. T. Higgins has been banged up. Deontay Johnson's been banged up. This is a talented roster. And then I looked at the rest, and his bench is super deep. I mean, he's super young. Like, his oldest guy is 24 years old. I'm like, just be patient. And that particular pick there, what's that going to do for you if the rest of your team catches on, right? You're 0-4. You just traded Clyde Edwards-Helaire to a potential contender, and now all of a sudden, let's say Jonathan Taylor catches fire, CeeDee Lamb catches fire. Now you're a borderline playoff team, and you're missing out on that, RB1, RB2. You gave him up for a pick that doesn't happen for 2 years.
Yeah, it's tough because through 4 games, we do have a sense of where we stand. And if you are 1-3 and 0-4, it's not a good feeling, right? Because you are very unsure whether you're going to make the playoffs. But I would hold off on making any major moves until week 6 or 7. I think that's the point in the season where we're close to the halfway mark. We have a better gauge on how many of these big performances are for real. How many of these players are indeed locked into certain usages, and at that point, you can say, okay, my team has X number of wins, but I either do or do not see myself getting the 3 or 4 necessary to make the playoffs. So for now, I would hold off on any huge moves.
Absolutely. So let's talk about next. Tyreek Hill is the unquestioned dynasty wide receiver 1. You've been right about it, and I got to give you props to that. But I mean, we know he's going to have those performances, right? Like week 2, where it's 3 receptions for 14 yards. But on the flip side, the reason we draft Tyreek Hill, where we draft Tyreek Hill, and I'm so happy in every league that I got him, because it's like I was at Hershey Park with my son. He's a big Chiefs fan. He loves Patrick Mahomes. And the updates just kept coming in, right? Tyreek Hill touchdown, Tyreek Hill touchdown. And he goes off for 11, 186, and 3. And the craziest part, that's not even his best performance. He is a league winner. He is a weekly winner. He's going to put up a dud now and then. In that offense, they're going to spread around. But, I mean, Tyreek Hill right now, and DLF just came out with the ADP in a 1-quarterback league. I think it's almost ridiculous that he is right now in DLF's, current. They do their mocks and they put everything out there. He's the 112 in a 1-quarterback league behind the following wide receivers. So Jefferson's going at 3, Lamb's going at 6, Metcalf's going at 8, Adams is going at 9, and Jamar Chase is going at 11. So you're telling me right now Tyreek Hill at 27 years old, 26 turning 27, he's not even there yet, is the wide receiver 6? I just don't see it. I feel like right now, and a lot of these, mock drafts, people are really drafting for the youth, and they're really trying to go out there and, like you and I talked before we jumped on here, predict the next big thing, right? The next big move. And just to catch everybody up here, CMC's still going 101. DeAndre Swift is the 102. So Jefferson at 3, Dalvin Cook at 4, Taylor 5, Lamb 6, Kamara still going at 7, surprisingly enough. Metcalf 8, Adams 9, Najee Harris all the way up to 10, Jamar Chase at 11, and Tyreek Hill at 12. How high up there should we really be having Tyreek Hill? I mean, I feel like 12, if I was drafting there and I was able to get him at 12, I would feel fantastic.
It's a tough question because, again, this is very contextual, right?
Yeah.
Because if you are 0-4 with a pretty bad team, or even if you're 2-2,
if you're 0-4 with Tyreek Hill, you didn't do the rest of your team right.
Right. Well, to correct myself, let's say you're 2-2, right? The 2 huge games that he had, you barely squeaked by with a couple wins. But you got lucky with, I don't know, the James Conner touchdowns too, right?
Yeah.
Let's say something like that. And the rest of your roster, it's just been a very fluky wins. You had, Jamison Crowder and maybe some other guys who just blew up early in a couple of these games. I do think it is time to sell Tyreek Hill because even if he is the current number 1 dynasty wide receiver, we know he's getting up there in age. And even if his actual contributions don't drop off too much, we know that his perceived value is going to drop because of his age. And also, I do have some qualms about Hill long-term because he is a guy who has developed that route running capability. But part of the reason he has such big plays is because of the speed. So we know that those types of speedy receivers can have issues as they get older, the hamstring strains and the soft tissue injuries when their bodies can no longer catch up to them. So it really depends. Right now, I can definitely see an argument for Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase over Tyreek Hill if you are not contending. Where I can't go is DK Metcalf or Devontae Adams.
Right. That blew my mind. Like Devontae Adams, I mean, we're talking Tyreek Hill is younger, and Tyreek Hill is putting up better numbers. And we have no idea. Patrick Mahomes is going to be there for the length of Tyreek Hill's, as long as Tyreek Hill is. But is Aaron Rodgers still going to be there for Devontae Adams? I mean, if we're talking about Tyreek Hill being a sell, is there a bigger sell than, I mean, we've been talking about it ever since Izzy was on. Devontae Adams, if you're not all in, is got to be the biggest sell out there.
Yeah, and then, it's all risk analysis, right? Because DK Metcalf is obviously much younger, but there is some question about what's going to happen with the quarterback situation. Seattle right now may or may not be the worst team in the NFC West. That is a really good division. Depending on what happens this year, we could see Russell Wilson potentially gone in 2022. We don't know what quarterback situation would entail without him. And we know that Pete Carroll still continues to want to lean on the run, even though they've been pacing a little bit faster. It just hasn't developed into that consistent elite production that we know a specimen like Metcalf can produce. But, again, it depends on how the team deploys him to an extent.
Yeah, the other thing I want to look at here is, I mean, we've talked about this before, but building your team around young wide receivers and drafting your startups around these wide receivers, the number of running back injuries we've had has been astronomical, right? We've lost so many guys here. And it's kind of a nice influx here of when we go to 2022, some of these wide receivers, are going to give you that nice insulated, less risks. I mean, how many of our big wide receivers, A.J. Brown's been down, Julio, but for the most part, wide receivers have been healthy. We know that's something there. Running backs are going down big time, and it's one of those things where I think we need to look at that a little bit closer. We're always assessing and trying to take, where it's in the past 3 or 4 years ago, was take those wide receivers early, take those young guys. Then it became, well, I got to get those running backs. And now, if you look at it right now, it's a 50-50 split, and I feel like that's kind of come around a little bit, and people are starting to have different philosophies when it comes to that. The guy that's on here, the two rookies at 10 and 11, I think we definitely need to take a closer look at. I mean, Ja'Marr Chase, you and I were huge on him. We've been since day one. People were fading him there for the preseason. But you look right now, he's second in the league, only behind DJ Chark, at 3.93 yards per touch. He has looked fantastic, and he's tied to Burrow, and it looks like the same thing we were talking about, right? If Jefferson was a wide receiver one last year, Ja'Marr Chase is just as talented, if not more, and belongs in that same category after year one. I still see it happening, and he looks fantastic.
Yeah, and I don't think it's crazy if your 101 in Dynasty startups right now is Ja'Marr Chase in one quarterback formats. I don't know that I would do it, but I definitely see the argument for it. Even in redraft, I was higher on Chase than most. To me, I don't see Higgins being the number one in this offense. It's clearly Ja'Marr Chase from what we've seen, even when Higgins was healthy.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to look at here is, CMC's banged up, once again. Alvin Kamara has shown, like we were kind of saying, it might not be the same kind of, show for him. And these guys are starting to move back here where if you're not 4-0, if you're not 3-1, if you're starting out 0-4 and you have CMC, it might be time to say, you know what, I want to get Swift or Lamb or one of these wide receivers or Harris or Chase, get a package and try to make those kind of moves. A lot of times, I was talking to a guy last week, he was 0-3, and he said, you know what, I'm not trading Christian McCaffrey unless, I'm absolutely blown away. He's like, if for you, I'm going to need Chris Godwin and Saquon Barkley. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to give up that kind of, two premier assets just to get, to move into that situation. And then I look, and this week he lost again, so he's 0-4. Now he said to me, he goes, bro, what can you give me for Christian McCaffrey, right? The longer we go with this, and we have to look at it where if he gets banged up again, it's a 20%, I was looking at medical reports, it's a 20% more likely chance with the injury that he has to have another hamstring injury. If we miss 6-8 games like he did last year, he misses a ton of games, can we say there's a different 101? Christian McCaffrey's moving down, Kamara's moving down. It's an interesting type situation when you look at it.
Yeah, and we haven't even, touched on Alvin Kamara yet, who it baffles me that he's even in the top 12.
I know, right? Above Najee Harris. Najee Harris right now is in the top 5 or top 6 in the NFL in receptions. And I know it hasn't been pretty and it hasn't been, but that's what we want from Kamara, right? And he's not doing it. And he's 27 and Najee Harris is 23. That's a pretty big difference there.
Yeah, I don't really get it. I already had Alvin Kamara, I believe, at 18 or 19 in my preseason Dynasty rankings. There was concern about his target share and the overall efficiency without Drew Brees, and we're seeing that being a major issue. On top of that, we're seeing a lot of involvement from Taysom Hill in the red zone. We don't know who their quarterback is in 2022. If you could have gotten, DeAndre Swift plus a first or CH
Absolutely.
plus a first prior to the year, that's a move that definitely should have happened. But I think
we
it's a
talked
little
about
late
that.
at this point.
That's the kind of insulated move we talk about making all the time is trying to assess that next big. I mean, we were talking about it last year where if you could get CeeDee Lamb in a first for Devontae Adams, well, now look at that. The ADP they're right there, and then you added that first, and that's where that insulated value just takes off. I gave up Devontae Adams and got Darren Waller and Najee Harris. Like look at that. Najee is one pick behind him there. So I mean, that's going to change a little bit. The more chances you have, the better it is, and you kind of work that. One of the other trades that was sent in from Braden Straight, and that's his Twitter handle as well. And this one was kind of surprising to me. It was get Christian McCaffrey or Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Tyreek Hill. So it's an interesting type move. It said 12-team, full PPR, no bonuses or anything like that. And we look at you get a guy who's, the 112 versus the guy who's the 101. Does Clyde Edwards-Helaire make up that difference for you?
Oh, yeah, that's a smash accept for me.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking, too. I mean, it's like after the injury, if you're able to get Tyreek Hill and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that just seems that's the kind of trade I want to make all day long.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to panic about McCaffrey. It sounds like he might even return this week. But the question is, if he misses another stretch of 4 to 6 games, where does his dynasty value drop? Because he is getting up there in age. And then you also have to question if he continues having these types of soft tissue injuries, are they eventually going to cut into his workload, use Chuba Hubbard a little bit more? So even if he is healthy, he's not going to be quite that elite top 3 running back who's getting 90% of the touches in his backfield.
Exactly, and that's one of the main reasons why he's there. At that 101 spot is getting that much usage. Staying in the same division, a guy that I'm getting questions about all the time. Let's look at this. You got to be surprised that he's still healthy, right? And we've never denied the talent. Top 10 pick in the NFL. Mike Williams is now the wide receiver 5 with 19.9 fantasy points per game on 31 targets, 22 receptions, 295 yards, 4 touchdowns. He is now the 1B in that offense. It's Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, 1A, 1B, with one of the hottest quarterbacks in the league. I mean, Justin Herbert has put himself in that top 5 dynasty quarterbacks. I mean, he looks, we all had some questions there, but he literally looks the part. I mean, he looks phenomenal, and he has not regressed at all. The fact that he is the age that he is coming out and being on his second head coach, and he's still putting up these numbers, he looks really good. I mean, they could easily be 4-0. But the question is, so what do we do with Mike Williams, right? So I had a question last week, and I promised him I would go over it. This is from Grayson Chilton. And he said to me, he sends a question, what do I do with Mike Williams? I'm not in contention. Should I the guy wants to give me a first. I said, no, that's probably good value. But I said, let's shoot for a little bit more. It's a super flex league. Ask for a first and a young upside player. I suggest the guys like Elijah Moore and things like that. And he goes, well, let me go out and see what he says. And I said, well, start high. Don't just say any first gets Mike Williams. And that happened in the league that I'm in the UDLP. The guy said, hey, any first gets Mike Williams. That's not the kind of move I like to make in a group chat, right? Like, let's say Mike Williams is on the block. Or Mike Williams is up for trade. People don't like that term, on the block. But don't say any first gets this guy. Because if you do that, then you come and you accept it. You get a late first from Mike Williams. On the flip side, I said to him, let's shoot for this. Ask for a first, ask for a second, get a guy thrown in, see what happens, and you can work back. It's part of the negotiation. Let's talk. So my man goes out there and he gets Jacoby Meyer, who is the wide receiver 7. He's top 7 in targets, top 7 in receptions, a 22 first and a 22 second. I think this is Jacoby Myers is only going to improve as Mac Jones does. I think this is an absolute smash accept, and the kind of moves that I think you guys should make. Talk to me a little bit about the deal, and I mean, are you believing in Mike Williams? We've talked about it before. If he makes great contested catches, Justin Herbert has his, he trusts him, but we've always talked about he just lives with reckless abandon. There's the cops; they're coming for him.
Yeah. It's not even that, right? Because we know that he is a little bit older. He's 27 already. The Chargers already declined his 5th-year option. Is it possible that they still re-sign him, that they agreed to a deal? Sure. But the season he's having, I would assume that unless they're cutting Keenan Allen, they're not going to spend quite that much money on 2 wide receivers. So like we said with Devontae Adams, right, there's risk because 1, we don't know what team he's going to, and 2, we don't know what his quarterback situation is going to be like in 2022. So if you're rebuilding, there's really no reason to hold him. That's even beyond, the injury risk that you said, where he just kind of lays out for some of those catches. Although it is worth noting that he's being used, closer to the line of scrimmage, not quite just going out for deep bombs like he was with Phillip Rivers. So, to your point, let's start with the general and move down to the specific. I think, and we've done, I think we did a trade-centric show in the off season, but I don't personally ever just throw out offers in the group chat saying like, I'll take a first for this player. I prefer to coordinate my trade offers individually, because I think when you put that out to the market, it really kind of it puts a constraint on what you can expect back, right? And sometimes, again, this goes into more trade strategy than anything, but it just gives you less leverage when you're saying, I am definitely looking to sell this player, versus you making an individual offer saying, hey, this is just something I think might make sense, and we'll go from there.
Right.
But to your point, the trade, I don't know that I'm sold on Jakobi Meyers long-term yet, but to get him plus, a first and second, you said?
Yeah, in Superflex, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a move that I would make. Again, he is getting up there in age, and we know that he is hitting free agency after this season. So I would still sell him for a first under the right circumstances, but ideally, I think with his start to the season, you can get more for him at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's why he started out that way. And I was like, let's just change it up. Let's change the thinking a little bit. And you're right. I mean, once you put that out there, any first, you've literally taken away the fact that sometimes you just get blown away by a guy, right? A guy might be like, whoa, Mike Williams is killing it. I need a wide receiver. I'll trade you 2 firsts for him because I need that wide receiver 1. And, it happens sometimes. You'd be shocked by some of the offers that, I get in my inbox, and I'm sure you do as well. And I'm like, what? Who's offering that, But it's not a guy that says it in the group chat of, give me a first and I'll take him. The next thing we want to talk about is, some wide receivers. Should we trust them? Shouldn't we trust them? Deebo Samuel right now is the wide receiver 5. And these games don't look like flukes. I mean, he is a yards after the catch monster right now. And we've been on the Ayuk train. We've been on the Kittle. Is it Deebo time? I mean, right now when it comes to yards after the catch, and this is today's NFL. I mean, these Yak guys are what's killing it. Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift are 1 and 2 in the league, and Yak. Number 3 is Rondale Moore. Number 4 is Cooper Kupp. Number 5 is Deebo. And when you look at that, it's like those are the guys that everybody wants right now. Those are the guys that are really producing. Those quick outs, get it out so we avoid some pressure. And Deebo he's had injury problems, but he looks like a top 15 type wide receiver in Dynasty. I mean, if he can stay healthy, this is the kind of stuff that we wanted to see from him. What should we expect? I mean, Trey Lance is going to get the nod here this week. Super excited about that. I put that trade out there about like, do I give up next year's 101 and a pick to get Trey Lance? He looked great. Does Trey Lance coming in mean Kittle and Ayuk are going to get more involved? Because Jimmy Garoppolo really was just targeting Deebo, right? He was keeping things short. He was trying to get it out quickly. Let's talk a little bit about San Francisco and what's going to happen.
Yeah, Deebo Samuel is a tough one for me because he has had just such an extensive history of soft tissue injuries dating back to South Carolina. It's one of those things where like you never want to use the term injury prone, but when a player has recurring soft tissue injuries, it feels like that's something where that's just where their body is not quite ready all the time for those speedy plays that they're making, right? This is a tough one for me because I think he's a buy in the right situation. He's a sell in the right situation. This is very value dependent where if you can get, that same return for a first and a second in Jakobi Meyers, I would sell Deebo Samuel for that. And I do think that he is in that same category as Mike Williams because how old is Deebo Samuel?
I believe 25.
Yeah.
He was another older guy coming in.
He's not old, right?
No.
He's not quote unquote old, but he's not the perceived value around him is not the same as it is for other players who are a couple of years younger than him.
Exactly.
So I'm not worried about his age. Again, I said I would value him very similarly to Mike Williams, where I think he's going to be great this year. but there are risks that come along with him.
Yeah, and the very promising thing to look at is last year, you looked at Debo's air yards, and they were, I mean, it was like negative air yards, right? I mean, we were like, his ADOT was just, everything was behind the line of scrimmage. This year, you look at it, and he's got 21 receptions for 320 yards, 309 air yards, which is very surprising because in the past, it's been bubble screens, it's been things back, and they're getting him a little bit more involved out there. I mean, San Francisco's going to be exciting. I saw one person tweet out, Russell Wilson that Trey Lance is going to outscore Russell Wilson in this second half of the season, or this last 3 quarters here. I have some situations, Mung, where I'm a contender and I have Tom Brady. So this is going to go against it here. I got Josh Allen. I was considering, a guy made me an offer. He wants Tom Brady and a first for Trey Lance. And I'm like, I feel like I got to do it, right? I mean, Tom Brady has looked fantastic with the exception of New England, but you get Trey Lance in that first, and Trey Lance's value is going to soar in the next couple of weeks.
Well, that blasphemy, but personally what I would do in that situation is I would sell Josh Allen for Trey Lance plus.
Yeah.
Because I think that Lance is going to give you, 85% of the production that you're going to get from Josh Allen, but you might be able to get Lance in a first just based on Allen's perceived value.
Yeah. Well, Josh Allen, he started to turn it around. And, the other guy that's in that same mold that I really wanted to take some time is Jalen Hurts is the QB3 right now. Only him and Mahomes are the only 2 guys that have been a QB1 each and every week. He's averaging 290 yards through the air, averaging almost 60 yards on the ground. Can we expect this? I threw that out there in the bold takes that he could possibly be a top 5 quarterback. The way he keeps running the ball, he just keeps looking a little bit better each week. I mean, the Eagles defense isn't going to be stopping anybody. It's going to be a lot of, playing from behind, but Jalen Hurts might not be pretty, but he is definitely a QB1.
Yeah, and we knew that the upside was there, right? Because of his rushing production that we saw a glimpse of towards the end of last season. My issue with Jalen Hurts was always the risk of whether he got benched this year, depending on his play. And again, I'm not like a QB film guy. I have people that I go to on Twitter that I trust, Waldman among others. And all the reviews have been glowing that he's making the right decisions. He's not turning the ball over. He's not making some of those Carson Wentz mistakes that we saw, because he has been under pressure too, but he's not just chucking it up and he's not fumbling. I think that Jalen Hurts is a strong, strong buy right now because he could be, in that Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray tier in maybe even a couple weeks. I think the sample size is still small, so there might be an opportunity to buy. But yeah, I believe in Jalen Hurts at the line, and I think the meat really swung in his favor.
I really needed a quarterback in Smash except one, and I gave up A.J. Brown in a deal that brought me Jalen Hurts. But I mean, after what I saw week 1, and then I was like, I was really happy. I talked about that when we were on the pod, that he was making smart choices, right? And that he wasn't forcing the ball, and he's done that. His 65% completion percentage, I mean, that's no joke compared to last year was barely 50. He was barely getting out there. 65%. The turnovers are he is one of the least turnover quarterbacks so far in the season. And that's really been surprising because, I mean, they did play San Francisco in there, and I mean, the Chiefs are an absolute sieve. That's a little bit different. But he's looked the part, and I think he's a guy that, if you're in a situation where you're trying to move down and get a insulated value, I think he might be one of those guys that you can pick up and get a lot of value. We saw what we liked from Jalen Hurts, but nobody saw this. So Cordarrelle Patterson is not just a kick return specialist. He's the RB1 in fantasy, right? So I picked him up in almost every league after week 1, right? Because not a lot of leagues owned him. He wasn't one of those highly owned players. And I was just like, it's worth a shot, right? He's shown some glimpses time to time. Then week 2, he goes out and he scores another touchdown. And then week 3, I think another touchdown, maybe a pair of touchdowns. Then this week, I'm like, maybe I should start him. It just felt weird, right? Like, maybe I start Cordarrelle Patterson. Dude scores 3 touchdowns. He is the RB1 right now. 11, he's, what do we have here? In Atlanta, he touched the ball 11 times for 116 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, they're going to keep using him, right? They have to keep using him. Are we in a spot where we can start Cordarrelle Patterson? I mean, some people have been smart and been doing it since week 2. I feel like most of my rosters, I'm like, I'm not going to make a decision where I'm like, yeah, I think I'm benching DeAndre Swift, Austin Eckler, and these type players for Cordarrelle Patterson. But the dude, he has wide receiver and running back options in a lot of leagues. You could be one or the other. Should we start trusting it? It sounds weird, right?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm seeing a lot of conflicting tweets where one person will be like, sell Cordarrelle Patterson, the touchdown percentage simply isn't sustainable, which is correct.
100%.
And then I see someone else saying, well, he's being used in the proper way. This is sustainable, maybe not the touchdown part, but the rest of his production. And that's also correct.
I mean, he's got 18 receptions for 235 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, even if you take away the touchdowns, 18 receptions, that's more than Jamar Chase. That's up there with, Hollywood Brown, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, DeAndre Hopkins. That can't be right. Yeah, it's actually for receptions. I mean, I'm going down through on Air Yards, which is now on FTNFantasy.com. You guys should check that out because the stuff that they have on there when it comes to Air Yards is just awesome to look at. But, I mean, they are using Cordarrelle Patterson like we thought they were going to use Mike Davis. Mike Davis actually been an RB2 as well because of the slop time receptions of late. They're just kind of like both of them are borderline flex RB2 worthy, and it seems crazy.
So right now, the comp that I think is most apt for Cordarrelle Patterson is J.D. McKissic.
Okay.
Because we're seeing that Patterson, his snap count is still fairly low. He's playing between 30 and 40% of the snaps each week. So his opportunities are somewhat limited. But we know that he's being used, one, as a receiver a lot. So in PPR formats particularly, that's upping his value. And two, he's being used in the red zone. So clearly Matt Ryan has chemistry and trusts Patterson. He's one of the top guys that he's looking for. So my advice would be if you can get top 10 running back return for Cordarrelle Patterson, which I don't think you are in most leagues. I think most fantasy GMs are smart enough not to fully trust that. Then obviously he's a sell. If you're getting a first or more for him, that's a smashing sell.
Any first, you have to take it. I was saying after week 1, somebody was saying, I have Patterson and I got offered a second. I was saying any second is a sell for Cordarrelle Patterson after week 1. Now I think I would need second and a little bit of juice just because I don't anticipate this being a long-term thing. I've always thought Cordarrelle Patterson is a guy kind of like, he's not like Deebo Samuel, but you put the ball in his hands, he's going to make things happen. He can run the ball, he can receive anything up close to the line. He's going to make you miss. But, sometimes when things happen for 4 weeks, that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen the entire time. This is a definite sell opportunity. But if you can go out there as a contender and give a pair of thirds or a late second, I think it's worth having him on your roster just in case this is a little bit more than a fluke.
I could see him finishing in that RB20 range in PPR.
Just
on volume and then some touchdowns in the red zone. So again, if you're rebuilding and the best you can get for him is a second, I think that's fine. I would still take the second. But ideally after this 3 touchdown week, second and a third, second and a flyer third round guy like a D. Eskridge or one of those rookie wide receivers who were later in rookie drafts, something along those lines.
Yeah, I want to break down. I was talking about air yards, and then when you look at air yards, you can just start to see the writing on the wall here, right? Like Stephon Diggs is number 1 in the league with 537. Brandon Cooks, who's looked fantastic, and his target shares through the roof, is 519. Tyreek Hill 497. Devontae Adams 493. Tied with him, Courtland Sutton, 493 air yards. Courtland Sutton has been fantastic. I think you and I have been on the Courtland Sutton train for a while. He looks all the part of that wide receiver 1 that we thought he was. There it is. I know. Coming out, was it Nick Whalen was like, this is the guy, right? And he's shown glimpses of it. He borderline looks like a wide receiver 1 now.
So here's my advice for Courtland Sutton. I would not go out and buy him right now because I think Jerry Jeudy is on the cusp of coming back. That's going to depress his value a little bit because we know that Jeudy is going to take away some of that target share. For me, my upside case is after Sutton leaves Denver, right? That's what I want to see. I want to see him have a chance like Corey Davis to go to another team after this season and potentially be that number 1 guy. So I would value him in that. Excuse me. I would value him in that mid to late first range.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get him for that price, that's fine. If you think you can maybe get him for a little bit less in a few weeks, depending on how fickle these league mates of yours are, you guys know your league better than we do. You know which owners are smart, which owners not so much, and which owners are willing to trade a lot, and which owners generally you have to pry players away from them with your cold dead hands, right? So I would try and wait to buy Cortland Sutton if you are not contending. Or if you are contending, maybe sell high, because I do think that his target share is going to be limited with Fant there and with Judy coming back and Bridgewater really spreading the ball around.
The other guys that I wanted to look at was our target share, right? We have guys right now. The number one wide receiver in target share in the NFL is Brandon Cooks, just like we anticipated, right? Now, Brandon Cooks is 1, Devontae Adams is 2. We knew that was going to be happening. And then Cooper Kupp is 3 at 35%. Cooper Kupp, is still the wide receiver 1 through 4 weeks. And I'm seeing a lot of people have questions of like, should I trade CeeDee Lamb for Cooper Kupp? Should I trade, Justin Jefferson for Cooper Kupp in a third? And the answer is no. It's like Cooper Kupp is not going to maintain a 35% target share. However, Matthew Stafford has been locking onto him. We all wanted it. A lot of people were big on Robert Woods. Kupp has looked great. But again, a guy that's going to be turning 28 years old, we can't get too excited here. I'm seeing people selling for 2 mid superflex firsts. I'm seeing people, like I said, debate after CeeDee Lamb's had 2 straight bad games of less than 10 points. Should I start making those kind of moves? And if you're a contender, we're talking about giving up a lot of perceived value loss, right? We talked about it week 1, where in all offseason, I was buying Cooper Kupp and Adam Thielen on the cheap, given late firsts, because that was the value. Now's not the time to buy Cooper Kupp because you're going to overpay.
It's not, but if you're contending, I would be fine giving up an early first for Cooper Kupp, because really, what's the difference between him and a Keenan Allen, who's a similar age, similar target share, very reliable, clearly the go-to guy for their quarterback, and we know that Matthew Stafford's locked in for a couple of years at least. So if you need wide receiver help, or if you want to get that piece that you think can really strengthen your team when you're already a strong contender, then I think it is worth buying high on him, as long as you're not paying CeeDee Lamb plus or Justin Jefferson plus, right?
Right. It's definitely worth putting it out there. I mean, he's he is getting peppered. He's up there with he's looking at right now 431 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, that's ridiculous. That is, we've seen him do this on stretches before, and Matthew Stafford has looked everything that we wanted him to be with the Rams. The other guy that really surprises me, in the top 10 when it comes to target shares is Darnell Mooney. So we got to look a little bit. They announced Justin Fields is going to be the starter. Finally, he has not looked good, but they've put him behind an offensive line that just is scary. But Darnell Mooney, a lot of times when people are saying, is he worth a second-round pick? He's looked really good. And Allen Robinson has had a little bit of a disappearing act. Do we feel like that's going to start to balance out a little bit more, or is Mooney really someone that's here to stay?
That's another tough one. I think if you can get a first for Mooney, I would still sell at that cost, but certainly you're holding for a second because we have seen that upside. It's just that I don't know that he's a true number 1 in the league. What's going to happen when Allen Robinson leaves, right? Because so often we see these guys where we want them to be the number 1 for their team, but maybe they're most productive in that ancillary role, right? Like a Juju Smith-Schuster who had Antonio Brown there, right? What does Juju look like as a number 1 receiver? I don't know about that. The same goes for Darnell Mooney, and I think the production can be there with Justin Fields. We've seen him already get hit on some deep shots, whereas we never would have seen that before. But, again, it comes down to price point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Justin Fields, I some people have soured on him. Like, I have him in a couple leagues, and someone today offered me Daniel Jones for him straight. And I'm like, do we really think that's where we're at now? I mean, Daniel Jones, has looked good, and he's been running the ball. But, I mean, like, we're not abandoning ship on Justin Fields after a couple starts where we're talking about a poor offensive line. Now David Montgomery is banged up, so we got some things going on there. So I mean, hold on to Justin Fields. Don't get too excited. You know, you probably shouldn't have been in a position if you're a contender where you have Justin Fields as your QB1 or QB2. You know, want to have some of those other guys in there, and that part's fine. But I still feel like he'll be fine by the end, you know. So I'm excited for this week to see him play again. I'm excited to see Trey Lance get the start. You know, I'm excited for a lot of things. What's the biggest thing for you this week that you're looking to see?
Well, real quick before we move off of Mooney, a comp that I like for him is Marquise Brown. I think they're both those smaller speedsters, but I don't know that you're going to get consistent week-to-week production from them. They're going to be in that boom or bust wide receiver 2-3 category. So that's how I would label Mooney personally. But yeah, going on. Let me get your thoughts on some players that I've struggled to value. Right?
It's hard right now with some things. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, I like it.
Darrell Henderson is someone I want to talk about because we had all this excitement about Cam Akers preseason. We just didn't know how the Rams were going to deploy that backfield, and we're seeing basically the dream scenario that many wanted for Akers. Right? Yeah. Henderson has been an absolute workhorse when he's healthy. I personally had a little bit of concern of whether it would be more of a split with Sony Michel after he came back from the rib injury, but it's been all Darrell Henderson in his first game back. How are you valuing him?
That's been a tough one. And like in redraft, I was going after him. You know, like once he had that injury, I was like, this is a window. So I made an offer in my redraft leagues, and I feel like he was a guy that I was willing to give up a first. He's looked fantastic. I mean, when he's had the opportunity, and you're right, I thought Sony Michel was going to come in. Sony's kind of dropped the ball big time. I mean, you know, people got excited. If you sold Sony Michel for a second when that trade happened, good for you. You know, you've definitely made out. And I think the real question is going to be not is Darrell Henderson the starter the rest of the year, but what happens next year? You know, if he keeps looking like this, what does that do for those Cam Akers shares? You know, and Akers really only took over, if we've talked about it before, he really only took over when Henderson got injured last year. You know, and that's where through that playoff stretch he took off. This Rams offense is one that I want as many pieces as possible. You know, where there's a lot of players like that, where Henderson, even guys like James Conner, you know, I want guys in that back on that team. The Cardinals look phenomenal. The Rams look phenomenal. That game was fun to watch, and they're going to be high-scoring teams all year. Give me the running backs in those situations, and I'm more than willing to give up. I definitely would give up a late first and like a throw in there, maybe like 1-8 range, but I wouldn't want to give up too much more than that in a super flex. Is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to, speaking of Akers, we had that show where we talked about all these injured running backs, right? Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, and Travis Etienne, the three big ones. And, my stance on those guys was that the current players are going to have their shot at proving themselves to be the lead back going forward, whereas they're sitting on the sidelines, they're in rehab. And, it sucks, but that's how the NFL is, right? If you can prove now that you're worth a starting job, then you're going to keep getting that until somebody proves you wrong. Yeah. So there's risk right now in Cam Akers. J.K. Dobbins, I think we lucked out because none of the Baltimore running backs have looked phenomenal thus far. Mm-hmm. And then Travis Etienne, what happens if James Robinson continues to see this kind of workload and does well? What kind of role is Etienne actually going to come back to?
I was just going to transition to that next. I also looked up some Twitter trades. I mean, we have Fantasy Stan put Amari Cooper or Darrell Henderson and a 23 first, in Superflex. And I feel like that's not a bad move. I feel like you're getting a little bit of insulation there where you can possibly, buy a wide receiver with that other one.
Say that one again.
Amari Cooper for a 23 first and Henderson.
Got it. Yeah.
I
think that's fine.
I'm perfectly fine with those kind of moves. And that's something you got to go out there and do. As far as Etienne goes, same kind of thing is like I was going out there and I was buying him and I was like, James Robinson, looked rough weeks 1 and 2. A lot of the, we weren't necessarily trusting the Urban Meyers grind, if you will. I had to get that out there. But I was like thinking to myself, what if he gets fired, dude? Like Trevor Lawrence starts blowing up and things start looking good. But I traded James Robinson after week 2 in a couple of scenarios, and I I mean, I got Deshaun Watson for him in Superflex, so I can't really complain. But there was some moves where I was like, I'm not really believing in this, but James Robinson looks good again, and he looks like what he did last year. And you're right. I mean, those are situations where if you can get, I've gone back and forth. I know you've been, if you can get any first for ETN or Akers, do it. And I've gone back and forth. I've been like, if I'm rebuilding, I think I'll do that. But I mean, there's definitely some risk there in a rebuild now because neither of those guys look like they're there to stay. Henderson and ETN Henderson and why did I just do it that way? Henderson and Robinson look like they're there to stay too, and they're just going to keep eating into that same work. And I feel like that's why we are trying to assess the next big workhorse, and it's like obviously Najee Harris is getting used in crazy amounts of form, and there's not many guys that are getting that kind of usage, and it's just out there. I mean, everybody wants, like I said, DeAndre Swift we have at the 102. Everybody wants that, but Jamal Williams isn't going anywhere, and I feel like he's produced, and we're going to start seeing more and more Swift after we hear that from Campbell. This was his worst week yet, so it's like we want that next workhorse guy. So who else do we have?
So I want to ask you something from week 2 to week 4. Can you guess who is the number 8 fantasy scoring quarterback?
Sam Darnold.
No, he's actually number 2.
Oh, jeez. Kirk Cousins.
Well, he replaced Kirk Cousins in some ways.
Okay. He replaced... Oh, yeah. Tyler Heineke. He has looked good, right? This past week, I mean, he balled out. He was over 30 fantasy points. And I'm glad you said that because I'm like... In Superflex right now, I have one league where I have Lamar Jackson, Mac Jones, and Deshaun Watson, and I'm like, I need another quarterback, right? Like, Mac Jones is not getting it done, and I was shooting for Dak, I was shooting for Burrow, I was shooting for some big names, and ultimately I was like, yo, can I get Heineke from you? And I was like, I'll give you a second, and I think I got the guy almost there, right? Like, I was like, I'll just throw something else in there. He's looked good, and I think he's got to be the starter here. We talked about that after week 1, like, is he going to be the starter? And he looks good. I think that playoff glimpse that we saw of him last year, like, gave him that bit of confidence. And Fitzpatrick going down, he jumped in seamlessly.
Yeah, and to be fair, right, I want to stress that he has been somewhat lucky. We saw a Jameis Winston type of throw from him against the Falcons this past week, where he was falling backwards and he kind of chucked it up. And he was very, very lucky that McLaurin was able to kind of come back to it in the end zone, and it ended up being a touchdown when it very could have easily been a game-sealing interception. So I think there's still it's still kind of the diamond in the rough situation. I'm not 100% confident that he's going to be the long-term answer for Washington, but I think he could be.
I mean, if you look, he's on pace for 5,500 yards and 32 touchdowns. I mean, like, and that's not even counting what he does with his legs. The guy. I was watching a little bit of the game, I believe, last week, and they were talking to Rivera, and they thought that as far as just sheer athleticism, that he's a top 10 quarterback. As far as what I'm not saying he's a top 10 quarterback, but his athleticism is in the top 10%. Like he is one of those kind of guys who can do it with his legs too. And I think Logan Thomas going down is going to hurt a little bit. I feel like that was a nice security blanket there for him, but it's been fun, and you get the Giants twice, the Eagles twice, and the Cowboys twice. The Cowboys are looking a little bit better, but that helps.
Well, I want to use Heineke as a quick transition to talk about Taysom Hill, who might be a buy low right now, because we're seeing him get goal line usage, right, which is hurting Kamara, and we're seeing that Jameis Winston is still just bad, right?
It's
super
ugly,
inconsistent. Like, this is the time to try and acquire Taysom Hill, where people think maybe you're an idiot for buying after the 2 touchdowns. But really, we could see a quarterback change here in the coming weeks, depending on how the Saints are doing. And basically, Taylor Heineke is what we wanted Taysom Hill to be, right? He can run. He's not the best passer, but he's serviceable. And under the right circumstances, especially if Michael Thomas can come back and be, even 80% of what he actually is, then I think that there's an argument for Taysom Hill to be a borderline QB1 for the back half of the season if he eventually takes over that job.
That's a fun conversation because, we had our guy in Smash Accept Listener League 1. He messaged me, and he's like, what do you want for Jameis Winston, right? And I was like, 23 first, and he's yours, and I was like, and then he put it in the group chat afterwards that I'm willing to trade Dalvin Cook or Zeke. And I go, wait a second. He said Zeke. And then I was like, oh, wait, Mung gets Trey Lance this week. So now Mung has 4 quarterbacks. I'm like, I'm not going to get it. He's going to trade Zeke to Mung. I know it's going to happen. And then I was like, I'm going to lose out because I think Jameis Winston is eventually going to lose his job. I mean, he's got the least amount of yards out of any quarterback. Week 1, he was hyped up by that 5 touchdown performance. I think even one of his, last couple touchdowns was just that little like Hail Mary chuck up that he did there towards the end. The Saints offense hasn't been pretty, and I feel like a lot of people are just anticipating Michael Thomas comes back and it's going to change everything. We don't know that. Michael Thomas is one that I'm curious to get your take on because I have a lot of people asking, should I go buy Michael Thomas? I mean, is Michael Thomas going to come back and light it up, And it's like a lot of people are on the fence. Like, is Michael Thomas, being the diva that he is, comes back after week 8 and just kind of pulls the same kind of thing that he's been doing the last year and a half?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll ask you this. Who would you rather have right now? Michael Thomas or Mike Williams?
Well, I think you got to take the guy that's on the field, right? And the guy that's doing it, and he's with a real quarterback. I mean, I love Justin Herbert. I've been watching and I'm just like, I'm blown away, right? Like, we might not have believed it before, and it just shows what the QB evaluation sometimes coming out of college, especially even us in Dynasty, where we were off Josh Allen, we were off all these guys, we were off Justin Herbert. Those are the last guys that should go, and that's why we say if you get that late first and those guys fall to you, you go for it and you try to accumulate those kind of players.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would take Mike Williams. I mean, especially in Dynasty, because Michael Thomas, I mean, yeah, he could come back or he could get traded, or he could go to a situation where, he becomes Julio late in his career because he has the talent. But Julio always wanted it, and he went out there week in and week out grinding out. And I think Michael Thomas, his best days are clearly behind him. And if you sold him, you got plenty of value. Now's not the time. I had a guy in my league. I've been trying for years, right? I was like, I'll give you this guy plus, this guy plus, this guy plus. And now he's like, yo, do you want Michael Thomas? I'm like, nope, don't need him anymore. So I feel like we're past that. I had a guy offer me Hawkinson and Michael Thomas for A.J. Brown, and I was like, I love Hawkinson, but man, if Michael Thomas doesn't come back this year, or if he comes back and lays an egg, that's a loss. It's tough. It's really tough to evaluate a guy that's out like that.
I know we're running short on time here, but I want to end with this. A lightning round. Let's say you can trade a late second for any of these guys. Who's it going to be, Dalton Schultz or Dawson Knox?
So when we first started the pod, I said that I thought that Dawson Knox was kind of a Mark Andrews light, very similar as far as measurables, as far as college production, as far as everything. It looks like, this is year 3 for him. It looks like he's really clicked with Josh Allen, and I want pieces of that offense, and I feel like he has longer upside than Dalton Schultz, because I think Jarwin's still playing in there plenty, but Knox is that red zone target that Josh Allen is targeting quite a bit. And our deal, I had a deal sour because, I know he's listening to the show. Jared from our league was talking, and we're like, I thought Dawson Knox was worth 2/3. He said he was worth a second. It's right there, right? Like, I think Dalton Schultz is the same thing. They're approaching that second round value. They're definitely not worth a first. But if either of them, after 4 weeks, you're looking. I think Schultz is the tight end too, right? And Knox is top 10 as well.
For me, I think Knox is there where I would pay a second for him. Schultz, I'm a little bit more ambivalent on because, as you said, Blake Jarwin is still seeing a few snaps, even though clearly Schultz is getting more at this point. And then the other thing, too, that I'm slightly worried about is Dak Prescott has been spreading the ball around a ton.
Yeah, he has.
And how much of that
Gallup's
goes
coming back yet.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. Gallup is expected back in the next couple of weeks. So how much does that dilute the target share to the tight ends? And then the very last one, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being, he's going to be the next Gronk, and 1 being he's absolutely nothing, where do you have Max Williams?
So I liked him coming out of college. I really did. And I was taking him in the 3rd rounds of all of my rookie drafts. And we've talked about, we want pieces of that. I picked him up in Scott Fishbowl 11 because you want pieces of that Arizona. The next Gronk, he's got the body type, right? And he's got the athleticism. but I'm more like a 4 there, that he would be that, that prolific. But I do feel like he is similar to what we really want out of Mike Gesicki. You know what I mean? Like, he's athletic, he can get it done, he's a big body, and has tight end one, back end tight end one potential. What about you?
Yeah, I want pieces of that offense, but again, I think it's really going to be spread around. We've seen that
AJ Green even has looked good.
And it's hurting DeAndre Hopkins.
It's killing him.
But it's good for the Cardinals overall. So I would say I would value Dawson Knox in that mid to late second range. I would value Schultz in that early third range. And I think if you're really desperate for tight end help, a late third is okay for Max Williams.
Yeah, I was trying to look up DeAndre Hopkins as far as like, usually he's right up there at the air yards and target percentage and pretty much everything. But I mean, he's outside the top 25 in air yards. He's outside the top 25 in target share now. I mean, that's not something that any of us would have predicted ahead of time, and I feel like that's really, really starting to hurt a lot of fantasy owners.
If you can still get top 5-ish wide receiver value for Hopkins, I would do it, because I think there's still an opportunity where some league mates might think, he was limited by that rib injury for a couple weeks, right? And that's contributed to it. So, I think he can still be a top 12 wide receiver finish this year. But I don't know. I think he's going to be closer to wide receiver 15 than he is going to be wide receiver 5 in terms of points.
Again, why we talk about insulated trades, it dealt Hopkins for McLaurin plus, and it's like, if you had to choose right now, I mean, if someone's talking to you, I mean, are you taking DeAndre Hopkins or Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty much the same age. I would take Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, and it's even like, I saw some where it's like DeAndre Hopkins or Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson's getting peppered. I mean, he is up there in that target share. Granted, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger's noodle arm is looking rough, right? I mean, he's like 6 yards per attempt and things like that. Let's get Dwayne Haskins in there for some fun. But this has been a fun show. I'm glad we're back on here. There's been some circumstances, with some things that have gone on with some health, with some my family members, and last week, some car problems and things like that. But it was great jumping back on here. I had a blast. Why don't you tell everybody, anything that you're working on and obviously where they can find you?
Yeah, right now all my stuff's over at Fantrax. I've been doing a weekly quarterback streamers article. So for more redraft focused, obviously these guys aren't going to be on the waiver wire in dynasty formats for the most part, but you can check that out. I have some preseason dynasty rankings that I updated right before week 1. So obviously some of that's already changed, but you can still use it as a gauge if you need to. And then, we're always answering questions on Twitter. You can find me at FFA_Mung. That's MENG.
Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process.